So first I want to say thank you very much, Rose, for finding me and inviting me to come. Who I am, I'm very much a born and bred Cantabrian. I love being able to see the Port Hills up one side and the Southern Alps, particularly on a clearish day, and particularly in winter with snow on the other side. I don't live close to the beach, but the beach, anything water, is something that really feeds my soul. And so if I can get to a lake or stream, a shoreline, it does good things for me. So this is where I belong. I come from a heritage of social service and music teachers. Most of my life has been in social work, particularly in older persons' mental health and particularly dementia. So in terms of chronic diagnosis, chronic condition, both for people diagnosed and family members, that sense of change, that sense of loss, and the resultant grief has been a big part of my working life. Saying that, I've got family members who've got their own chronic conditions. And I want to say that change in our lives is a constant. But I don't know about you, but I don't particularly like change that I haven't initiated myself. So when the more I read and listened online regarding MECFS, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there is so much that I have not known. I've had a kind of a snapshot idea, but reading a bit more, I have a bit more understanding. But the expertise on this illness lies with you. So I make no profession of expert in your own situation of the diagnosis. However, what I'm hoping to do over the next hour is have some thoughts expressed around what does resilience look like? What is change and loss and grief in the mix here for you? And if you go away with just one golden nugget, either of something you've heard or you've seen or someone else has said, or you have a light bulb moment for yourself, then there's been real value in coming today. I also had the thought, given the energy levels that I'm hearing and reading and understanding, I almost thought there might not be very many people here. So I'm thrilled that you've all had the energy to come. So thank you, I appreciate that. So when we talk about resilience, I found this definition by the American Psychological Association that really resonates with me. Resilience is the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioural flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. It's a long sentence. I'm going to show the slide a couple of times during the talk just to bring us back, but I really like the idea that there's a process here. It's not something that you either have or you don't have, or it's a quick, a quick gathering of a resilience muscle. It takes time, it takes process, it takes some intentional work on it. I understand that there are some new people today, others who've been to something like this before. When I think of a diagnosis which is of a chronic nature, this quotation comes to mind by Richard Chu, A chronic illness diagnosis is a junction in your journey through life that takes you in a different direction than you desire or anticipated. Would that be a true comment? For those of you that have got a diagnosis that, you know, in your life you're heading down this direction, you know, whether it's education or study or work or retirement or whatever, you've kind of got your ideas of what your thoughts are, what your desires are, and then you have a diagnosis and you're not going this direction anymore, you're going maybe this direction. All the while, your mind's probably still wanting to be in this direction. Yeah. And so that, I think, takes a huge amount of adjustment to recognise you're looking this way and you're not looking this way. The thing is, if you try to do both directions, I think it's like you're trying to do the splits, and I don't know if any one of you has ever done the splits in life. But it's not well, unless you're an elite gymnast, I think it's a really hard ask to straddle two very different directions. Yeah.
Excuse me. My thoughts, my experience with this is more that it was a pause. And I was diagnosed 20 years ago, and I feel like it's more of a pause. I don't really feel like there's been another direction.
Okay, so it's like you're going this direction,
yeah,
and it's like things have just stopped.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's not really much life happening in that other direction.
Okay, okay. Would others have a similar experience, that it's more like a, rather than going in a different direction, it's more a pause?
Mine's more like siding the railroad.
Okay.
So,
yep.
Carry on going forward.
Okay. Okay.
And then try and get back on track with this can.
Okay. Okay. So I'm hearing the direction remains.
Yeah.
However, you're stuck in a holding pattern or a siding for the moment until you can find, you know, the way to keep joining the original track.
A detour.
A detour. Okay.
I think it depends as to behavioural.
Yep.
What it stops you doing.
Yep.
So, like for my daughter, she was 12. CFS surgeries, and she had no
Mm-hmm.
and she's able to do some activities now, but definitely if I look at who she is now.
So for your daughter, it would be more this, there is a different direction. So it just shows me how different individual presentations and experiences are. What we are saying, whether it's a siding, whether it's a kind of just a pause, whether it's another direction, you're dealing with change. What I would be keen to do is just write up on the whiteboard anything that's coming to your mind right now in this moment. What has changed? What is changing? It can be as general or specific as you'd like to be. So I don't want to ask anything of you which is too much. But, you know, would someone be prepared to say what's different?
Like grieving?
Grieving, yep. Which is perfect for this talk. Yep. So that would be increased grieving, presumably, from what was used, you know, what used to be.
Productivity.
Everything.
Yeah.
Give me maybe a couple of examples of the everything.
Yeah, like the change of direction is kind of, was for me very, very definite. There was none of that anymore. And all of a sudden, everything had changed. Like what I eat, what I do every day, where I'm going to, just all the things that people take for granted. it was just that overwhelming, like, I'm completely in a different world now.
I was thinking more literal, but I've just had to have my notice in at work.
Yeah, sorry, what was that about work?
I've just had to have my notice in my job.
Okay. So I put leave work?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like for me, I've had to plan everything now, like plan when I'm going to, if I'm going out for dinner, I have to have that. I
Yep.
have to, plan when I'm going to holidays correctly, so I'm not going to overload myself. It's just a big,
If I say plan to stop overload.
yes.
Any other changes? Like these are big changes you're saying, and they're probably changes within change.
Lose friends.
Lose friends. Okay. Anything else?
Productivity.
Yes, and
I'd say the opposite. I've also, I can't plan ahead, so I plan it and then I can.
Yep.
I can't do it, so I've stopped planning and disciplining myself and others,
Yeah.
following other things at the time.
Yep.
Okay, productivity.
Any other changes?
Oh, lots of money.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
giving
I've
up
got
your job.
financial. Okay. What I found in my introduction, I was saying that my background is a social work. What I now do is a range of roles across the week. So in part, supervision, counselling work, and some ACC social work. And I found myself over the last 2 or 3 months talking about a circle, about what's outside of our control. And so I put that outside here, outside my control. And it's what's in here in my control. And I never know for sure, but I hope kind of that graphic can be helpful sometimes for people, because there are things in our lives which are truly outside our control, that we, no matter how much we rant, rail, bang our heads against a brick wall wanting things to be different, it just is as it is. And so ideally we don't want to be using more energy than we have available to trying to change something which actually is outside of our control. Where we want to start to put our focus is what is in our control. And it's like we're coming back to this, plan. If you've got a big event, so like presumably coming out today, you may have had to plan for quite a quiet morning and not much else happening today either, just to kind of modulate your daily rhythm so you're not overloading yourselves. And so when we come back to looking at what's in our control, what's out of our control, I don't know if E Frankl was a name that you know. He was a Jewish person in the Holocaust in a concentration camp, survived it and wrote a book, In Search of Meaning. And he said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Sometimes I want to use the word invited to change ourselves rather than challenged, but challenged might actually have the money on the button there. The thing, it's hard to change ourselves, but if there's things in our and a world which we can't change, and that's often natural events, diagnoses, other people in our lives having their events. There's things which we cannot influence significantly, and so, as Viktor Frankl suggests, that what can we do ourselves to adapt to our circumstances? And so here's this definition of resilience again, and I've broken it into two parts so that we've got the process and the outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experience. But it's this last part which I think is not the description, but the method. And that is through mental, emotional, and behavioural flexibility, my highlighting, and adjustment to external and internal demands. And I think the key thing here is that flexibility. I'm sure we've all experienced some really, really windy days, and it's those trees that can kind of bend with the wind that seem to be able to, bend and then come back to balance again. And in a really strong wind, those which are really rigid and solid can at sometimes be totally uprooted. And I have a sense that as human beings, we are hardwired for survival and to live our best lives. But there are often things that happen that really knock us. And if we can develop some strategies, some techniques, have people around us that can hold us so that we've got the flexibility to find our balance again. So here are some thoughts around working with change. They are not definitive. You may challenge. So change is truly part of just being alive. And the older I get, the more I recognise the wisdom of that. And in my garden, I have still some roses blooming, so summer flowers. I already have some early cheer daffodils out with their beautiful, well, I think beautiful fragrance. And we're only just coming into winter. So like the change is topsy-turvy, but it's layered. But as the seasons change, our life changes too. It's absolutely normal that unless we instigate the changes ourselves, we tend to be resistant. I'm not sure if you're able to, and feel comfortable, pass if you don't, just fold your arms. And have a look which hand is outer, is on top. So for me, it's my left, my left hand. Yeah. Okay. Neither. Okay.
I don't know what that means.
That's okay. Okay, but even for you, let's see if you can put it round the other way. So you can still tuck your hands in, but just have your wrist on the other way. What's that like? Horrible? Don't like it? You've just done change. It's not familiar. And as quick of a flat, you're probably back to this way.
You can't do it.
You can't do it. Love it. I've done that sometimes even with clasping your hands, which thumb's on top. And then put the other thumb on top. For me, it feels really weird. And the thing is, it's neither right nor wrong. If your right finger's on top or right hand on top or if your left hand top, it doesn't matter. Anyone walking past you will say, oh, that person's just got their hands clasped or, you know, got their arms folded. They're not going to think what's happening on the inside for you, that this is familiar or this is a change and this is really unfamiliar. Yeah, and I think that's a significant phrase to hang on to. People won't necessarily see what's changed for you. Yep, because you may look absolutely as you've always looked. You're carrying on as much as possible in life. But remember, change is there and it's not familiar. It's not familiar, it doesn't feel normal. In that definition, we talked about mental, emotional, and behavioural flexibility. So the next one picks up the mental flexibility. This is really, really important. Pay attention to your thoughts and your attitude, because our mind is a busy creature. Often people talk about the monkey mind. It talks to us all the time. Well, I don't know about you, maybe yours don't, but my mind talks all of the time. And it can be good stuff, bad stuff, mindless stuff, negative stuff, judging stuff, criticising stuff, comparing stuff. You know, it's a busy thing going up there in the headspace. Would that be a fair comment for many of us? Yeah, I'm seeing the odd nod or two. And what I often say to people who come and see me is start to get used to noticing what's going on in there and putting a name to it. So rather than it just kind of being this monologue, that you actually start to take notice what's going on. You know, my mind is saying you should be up and, you know, getting on with your day. You know, you should be back on the main track, not on the siding. You ought to be, you know, catching up with your friends. And we know that's not so easy or possible if you're dealing with something like MECFS. Like, it's just not a goer. What you focus on, a good question is this helping me or is this hindering me? Is this helping me or is this hindering me? We'll look at energy in a little while, which fits in with this. You do not have to like change, but it's around making space and allowing it to be there. You know, this may not be your whole life story as you are now, end of May 2023, but it is what it is right now. And so allow it to be what it is right now. In a year, 5 years, 10 years, life will be different, will have changed again. I won't say necessarily worse, won't say necessarily better, it will be different. When I say flex your change muscle, every time we navigate through something which is different in our lives, we're having to find a way to integrate that into our lives. Again, easy if we've initiated the change, less easy if it's outside our circle of control. But each time you find a strategy or a technique or a person that helps you through a change, try that out next time you're faced with change. Because it's, you know, if you've, has anyone ever been a gym bunny in their lives? Yep, there's one, at least one admitting to having it. So the gym bunnies in our world, you know, will have started from scratch at some point and then started to build up some muscle, yeah, by repetitive stretching, strength training, weights, you know, etc. So the concept is the same for our change muscle. The more you intentionally acknowledge it and use it, the stronger it will get. disempowering feelings. They're the sorts of things that I would name like fear, like guilt, like doubt, all of those uncertain things about what might be happening now or in the near future or in the distant future, and the feelings that can get really overwhelming. I'm a real feeler, and very different from health, but I've been navigating a hot water cylinder leak and wet carpets and insurance and assessors for the last 6 weeks. Think I'm on the home run, and the whole hot water cylinder floods last night, and then I'd already organised the carpet people to come and sort the little bedroom behind the cylinder. They come in, they're saying, oh, we've just, there's a joint which is disintegrated, so now I've got another technician coming up tomorrow. A plumber's been this morning. And it's just like, oh, really? This is hard going. This is really hard going. And, the times that the feelings can get kind of really ingrained. It's like, will I ever be clear of this damn hot water cylinder? And the drama's going with it. Like, that's minor in terms of health situations. But we're all human. We all have a mental capacity, and we all have a feeling capacity. And so just watch out for some of those feelings that can hijack you and take you on another detour, which is actually not going to be that helpful in terms of marshalling your energies for your day-to-day functioning. There are 2 questions that a GPS or a sat-nav machine asks you. What are they? What's the first question? Yep, second question, where are you going? What's the first question? Where are you now? Yep. And I think, we can get, if whether we're feeling we're paused, whether in another direction, whether we're kind of parallel but not quite on the track we want to be, it's like, okay, where are you now? Take an assessment of where you are right now. Where do you want to be going? Where do you think, in whatever time frame or time frames you want to be? And then, in the GPS, it maps a course, and sometimes it maps a few courses, doesn't it, with different time frames. So I think, when we're dealing with things like, debilitating illness, where are we now? Take stock of where you are now, not where you were last month, last year, 3 years ago. Where are you right now? Where do I want to be heading? Even if your mind starts to say, well, you're not going to get there, like, you haven't got the energy, you haven't got the mobility, you haven't got the social network, you haven't got the money. Like, that's a natural mind response. Park some of those thoughts and just see, where do I want to be heading? Because then that can help you start look at what are the steps, and they might be, rather than a stride, there might be a shuffle step. But as long as there's some movement in the direction you want to go, it is still movement. Even if it's 2 steps forward, 1 back, there's still 1 step forward in that scenario. Where there are lots of changes, and sometimes they can come thick and fast, sometimes what is helpful is to look at or focus on what has not changed. What is still the same? And it might be the way you fold your arms. But humour aside, it could be a pet who's still very much in the mix of your life. It could be a partner. It could be a parent, a sibling, a really dear friend. It could be nature. It could be the sun rising or the sunset you can see in the sky. It could be music. It could be prayer. It could be, listening to whatever. So look at what's still the same, because that helps the balance.
When you read it out, I thought, oh, yeah, almost symptoms are still the same.
Yes, I just. I'm more positive view, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anyone want to make a comment on any of that? So here I'm saying, like, unwanted change can often bring loss. Yep. If we think of a seesaw, you know, if I suspect most of us have perhaps changed houses at some point in our lives, and it may be, you know, for a gain reason, you know, bigger house or a smaller house, or you know, better garden, or closer to bus stop, or whatever. But even on the positives, there can be some losses. It's like, I've lost a really good neighbour. I've lost the dog that used to come and visit me every day. You know, so when we have change, we will often have loss and grief in the mix. But sometimes it's, you know, the seesaw tips in one direction more than the other. And I think when we're dealing with unwanted change that's come a visiting, the loss is far more prevalent and intrusive than any gains in the mix. And so wherever there's loss, there's grief. It's like day follows night, follows day, loss, grief. It's a really natural response. And grief will affect us in many different ways. It can affect us physically, so that we don't eat, or we eat more, or we drink, or more or less, or, you know, we want to curl up and just hide under the covers in bed and not do anything. We can feel physically sick. We can hold tension. You know, so physically it can affect us in lots of ways. It can also do a lot with our mind, affect us mentally. So, you know, I'm aware that brain fog is part of MECFS. If you're dealing with grief as well, there's another layer in the mix. Because when we are grieving, our brains don't work so acutely and sharply. If we're tired, our brains don't work so well either. Emotionally, like, you know, it's all those feelings of sadness, maybe anger, despair, you know, there's a whole family. It's like a whole wool bundle of tangles. And you pull one out and then you find there are some other feelings coming with it as well. And behaviourally, you know, again, it's, I kind of touched on that with the physical, you know, we might do more of something or less of something as a response to grief, which is response to loss, which is a response to change. Yeah. This is really normal. You don't have to like it, but it's a really normal human process. So sometimes I think it's useful understanding some of the different losses and griefs that come together. And I could have put types of loss and grief in the mix, except it wouldn't have fit for the bottom, disenfranchised. But, you know, there's the actual loss with the grief response to that. So that could be, for example, handing in your resignation to work, not being able to work. But I bet you there's some associated losses and griefs with that. So just as a room, what would you say would be the other secondary or associated losses with no longer being able to work?
Status.
Sorry?
Status.
Still haven't.
Status.
Status. Sorry. Yep, got you. Yep. Loss of status. Yep. What else? Social. Yep. Connection, interaction. Yep.
Loss of self-identity.
Loss of self-identity.
Loss of money.
Yep, that's a really obvious one in the mix too. Loss of money. Yep. So we've just named like 4 associated losses with kind of the most visible, obvious change loss. Yeah. Shall we do another one? What would be another? So what about what you do every day? So, no, is that going to be helpful?
The loss of routine or friends.
Yep, loss of routine. Maybe loss of spontaneity. Yeah. Loss of independence, maybe.
Yeah.
You'd be reliant on someone else just to help with driving or, you know, cooking, or some of your independent routines that you had just, you know, so easily under your belt beforehand. So it's not, there are layers here. Anticipated is very much what it is like. It's looking into the future, what might be the loss, and therefore what might be the grief in the mix there. So anyone be able to give me an example? Mobility, okay. So the question in the future, will I be able to be independent with my mobility? Yep. That's a big question, isn't it? And if you're having, you know, if you're thinking around some of those thoughts and pondering, might this be in my future, which is a loss, there's going to be grief. You know, your heart, I don't know about you, but my heart sinks when I look into the future and I think this might be, you know, my vision's not that great. So I'm thinking, you know, what if I can't see to drive one day? What's that going to mean? It's very much anticipated. So we just need a cautionary note with anticipation, because it may be reality, it may not be reality when you get to that time in your life. And I think we don't want to borrow tomorrow's, the future's loss and possible loss and grief for now, because that's going to use your energy. Ain't helpful. And again, I often work in imagery and pictures. So if you could imagine driving from here to Dunedin at night time, you're in a car either as a driver or as a passenger, driving to Dunedin at night time. Can you actually see your destination at the time you start out? You can in your mind, but physically, no. So my next question is, how far can you see? You're driving at night. How far can you see? Any ideas?
I wouldn't get very far.
Wouldn't get very far. Okay. So what would you turn on at night time? Headlights. So how far can you see?
As far as your headlights.
Perfect answer. You can only see as far as your headlights, and you've actually got to drive to those headlights for the next stretch to show up in your headlights, yeah? And so until you do, you don't know if the bridge is out and you've got a detour. You don't know if there's a possum staring at you with those big eyes. You know, so come right back to what your headlights are showing right now. Be cautious about how much you're anticipating Dunedin, when in actual fact you need your energy for looking at what your headlights are showing up right now. Yep, fair comment. Yep. Cumulative is the layer, you know, the accumulation of change, of loss, of grief. So, you know, we've talked about some of the changes and the losses which come with this diagnosis. In the mix, because you're not isolated with the diagnosis, it could be that you lose a pet. It could be that you know, knock your mouth and you lose a tooth. It could be that you've got a family member going through a divorce, or someone else that is very dear to you that's got his or her own health diagnosis. So cumulative is where we are trying to navigate our life when we've got lots of things going on, not just in our own world, but maybe in the world around us. Disenfranchised grief is, I think, such a good one for a debilitating illness or a chronic diagnosis or a terminal diagnosis. When we die, there's some real routines and understandings from society as to and they keep changing too, what we do. When you're dealing with change and loss and grief from day to day, week to week, month to month, for however long, people often don't get that. They can't always put themselves in your shoes and understand how it is from your inside. And I think, I don't know about you, but people have said to me over the years, they'll say, oh, you're lucky to have your husband still alive, mine's dead. Or, come on, you've been dealing with this for the last 12 months, surely it's time to get cracking and move on. Anyone had comments a bit like that? Absolutely, yep. So this is what I would say is disenfranchised, like it's almost like you're being shut down from expressing your truth of how you're experiencing life and how hard it is and what the challenges are right now. I better keep an eye on the time. Okay. Grief is what happens immediately when we have a loss. Grieving is a verb, it's a doing word, it's what we do, it's work. So that's what I want to say about this slide, like grief will come at us, but when we're in a process, there will be grieving in the mix, and that's an ongoing situation. And so how do you manage living with loss and grief? So again, these are just some thoughts I've put together. They're not definitive. They're not, the only things in the mix. I've talked before about noticing and naming. This time I've talked about your feelings. Notice what's going on. It's easy to feel not at ease or kind of out of sorts, or just, something's not right, and we still just keep going. My encouragement would be to take a moment and ask yourself, what am I noticing? Am I noticing like a real ache here, which might well be that sadness and that grief? Do I notice something down here in my stomach area, which might be fear? I think when we start to name some of the feelings that come up for us, it's like they can come, they can stay, they can go in their own time. Because I suspect none of us would say we have a feeling that stays with us constantly in the same intensity all day and all night. It will come, it will go. Again, to put energy into trying to push away, the sadness or the fear or whatever, we're using energy up, which is not in our best interests. If we can just, okay, here's fear again. Okay, just stay there. Okay, so just allowing that space. Experience goes along very much with it. It's like we can get very heady. It's like, I think I'm feeling sad. If you're feeling it, you're going to be feeling it. And it could be for many here, it could be other parts of the body. We're all different. Give them validity. Right? They're there for a reason. They're there to give you information. They're not right, they're not wrong. So allow them to be present when they show up, and just recognize, oh, here you are again. Okay. When we grieve, again, it's really hard to stay intense in the grieving process. And I've had people, and I've experienced myself, there are times I can be in a real grief response to a loss. And there are moments I can chuckle, I can smile, I can share a joke with someone. And I think we need those times of respite where we just step back from the intensity, just to kind of regroup before we perhaps start to feel that the bigness again of what we're dealing with and the emotional response to it. So it's that kind of withdrawing engagement, not necessarily physically like I'm showing, but even just in your mind space. Next one is be patient, keep going, even if it's half a step or a shuffle step, or just finding your balance in the moment. Patience, we live in a consumer-driven society where we want stuff now. You know, with online stuff, we can click and we can get it now. Life isn't really like that when we're living it mentally and emotionally and behaviourally and physically. There's a linear aspect to it. And, you know, if we're going in another direction, if we're on a siding, if we're paused, I missed some other of those pictures we had at the start, I'm not sure. You know, patience, I don't know that patience is a virtue, but it's a helpful quality just to recognise this may not be as good as life gets right now where we are. And we don't know what we don't know. So this is reality for you right now in this room at this time. If we were to meet again in a future time frame, things might look very, very different. I often encourage people to either talk or write. So whether it's talking to a friend, a professional, your dog, your cat, you know, whether it's keeping a journal or something on a computer system, like just expressing what's going on in the inside for you, because often it's better out than in. You know, to be able to give validity to what your experience is, even if other people don't really get it or understand it, for you to name it for yourself gives it real meaning and reality for you. The next ones are all much of the same family. So take care of yourself. So they're the basics that we know, but sometimes don't remember, don't do. So it's around, you know, what food you eat, keeping hydrated, and something I saw the other night talked about, you know, if there's a flare, keeping really hydrated for that particular gentleman was a real intentional move on his part. My understanding is that sleep isn't always that great. Is that correct? Yeah, there are nods. So whatever you can do to rest, whether it's, you know, not being able to plan or planning, you know, to have time in your 24-hour period where you can just unplug from stimulation. You know, listen to what your body is requiring of you and honour that, honour the answer you get. Be kind to yourself. You know, this is often this mind going saying, you know, you ought to be doing this, or surely you could do this, or, you know, I'm sure you could come out today and you could just get some groceries on the way home. Like, you know, if you can't do that, don't do that. Like, be kind. Be really, really kind to yourselves. Nurture yourself wraps it up a bit. So if there's something that would really nourish your spirit, whatever that might look like, whether it's sitting in the sun, whether it's having a massage, whether it's, I don't know about for the chaps, having your nails manicured or whatever, you know, that nurturing, so that you are in your body and you do some good things, even though your body's doing, you know, challenging you. Be supported. So whether that's from immediate family or friends or professionals, your doctor, you know, the society, whether it's online forums, find a tribe that understands and gets it. Okay. This is my monorail cat, who is no longer with us, but he was the most gorgeous, sensual cat that just had it all out there. And so he had, I think, a really good sense of what is energy. was in any one moment. And I'm thinking, the question, what have I got energy for, is such a good question to ask ourselves, whether we're healthy or not healthy, whether we have an illness, whether we don't have an illness. Because I think if we ask ourselves, what have I got energy for, and we wait for the answer, which will come, and if we act on it, we set ourselves up for a really good rhythm in our day or our week. And one memorable, it's ages ago now, not long after I started using this question in lots of areas of my professional life, I was just feeling like one morning at home. And so I asked myself, what have I got energy for? I had a list I'd written down of about this long of chores and tasks and, you know, things that were to be done. But I asked myself, and the answer I got was rest, read a book. And I thought, oh God, that's a challenge for me, because I like my list and I like crossing things off because it gives me a sense of completion and productivity and satisfaction. Well, blow me down, I took my own advice. I spent the whole morning reading or daydreaming or, you know, just curled up on the couch. What I found absolutely extraordinary is come mid-late afternoon, I checked in again and I found I actually got a wee burst of energy. And oh my goodness, in the next 2 hours, I had crossed off many of those things on the list, not all of them, but it was such a lesson to me that because I listened to my own energy needs on that occasion and I just needed downtime, it freed up energy later in the day. And that's for me, is like changing my thumb to the other side, because I like to do all my things first and then relax. So this was quite a different change for me. So speaking from personal experience, there is some benefit to asking, what have I got energy for? And that might be around your physicality, it might be around, what have I got mental energy for? You know, if you're having to do financial books or legal stuff or write emails or whatever, or prepare a presentation or whatever, you know, again, when you think you need to have it done, you may need to regroup and think of your thumbs being somewhere different to get it done. Emotionally, you know, if we've got layers going on in our life, having a whole lot of layers all at once is overwhelming. So again, what have I got energy for? And sometimes you might need to say to someone, even who's quite close, I can't do this right now. You know, I'd like to, but I can't do this right now. Socially, you know, we've talked about, you know, loss of friends and the energy to be out and about or to have people come into your own home space. Again, it's like maybe putting some boundaries, some limits onto actually what you can manage in that moment or on that day. There's no judge here that you're doing this right or you're doing this wrong. It's for you to determine what works for you, so workability. And I think, coming back to that definition again, resilience is the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioural flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. So as I finish up with one more slide, it's around, you know, looking at what we've done with change and then the loss and the response of grief to loss. They're all little pieces of the puzzle to make up a growing resilience picture. At least that's my hope and my aim. And you may or may not know the Serenity Prayer. I've just changed the first few lines to acknowledge anyone who doesn't want a God word in the mix. So may I have the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you.